The service shut down?
Oh no, he's long gone.
Yeah.
It's Bill Livornia.
I mean, where would Mike Berkowitz be?
Yeah, Michael Berkowitz took that. Michael Berkowitz followed him as the MD.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Bill passed a while ago. We're gonna have to, this small camera, we're gonna have to recenter.
Yeah.
That's all.
Could you use some water? Get some. Yeah. We're back. Oh, we're back.
We're back.
All right, we're back.
You might want to recenter that little one there.
Yeah, look at that.
If we're back up.
How's that look?
She's got to go a touch towards Alan. I can see it from here.
Okay.
There you go. You got it.
You want water, Alan?
What?
You want water?
Yeah, could we get some water?
That'd be great. Well, welcome back.
Where were we?
We think we lost it somewhere in the relationship to the flesh hoop to the shell.
Interesting, they call it flesh hoop because it was from the calfskin days.
Correct. So back in the day, this was wooden or metal, and people tucked calfskin around it,
There you go.
put it on the drum.
There you go.
Look at that. Did you get Alan one? Yeah, later. Well, give me one later. Sit down, relax. I gotta think. We gotta reset.
All right, so flesh hoop to rim.
Flesh hoop to shell. There
Shell.
has to be a space between the flesh hoop and the shell, or the drum won't sound. So one of the other reasons I brought this drum is, while it's unique and a one-off, this belonged to my friend and mentor, teacher. This was Sonny Igo's. Now, Bobby Grasso was a student of Sonny Igo's, and that's why Sonny had some Fibes drums given to him by Bobby. Where the hell did that head go? Where'd that Evans head go?
Right there.
On the drum.
Thank you. That's why I couldn't find it. It was in front of me. I can remember as a young man, of which I'm not anymore, looking at this drum, because I played black drums for years, thinking, man, I'd love to have a drum like that. Now, I have a Fibes drum. It's a 5.5. This is a 5. It's unique. And Sonny always told me, the drum's no good. I said, oh, Sonny, man, it's a great drum. Let me see it. He goes, it's no good. Come on, let me see it. And it's in the corner for a reason. It's no good. Well, now I've taken it apart and I've learned it's no good. And
why isn't that
we're going to go over that. The shell is oversized. You have to pry the head onto it. It took a rubber mallet for me to take this thing apart. It's oversized. You can't have that. If your head goes on the drum like that, it's not going to sound, period. And I've seen a lot of guys who shall remain nameless that will argue with me about this and tell me I'm wrong, or I can take a router to that and reshape it. I can do that. Well, if you're going to do that, you might as well change the shell to the correct outer dimension. So you need, let's just say it's a 14-inch shell. It's got to be about 1/8 of an inch under on the outside, or you can't get the head on and off of it. So that's what happens if you have an oversized shell. You're sunk. The fix is you need a new shell or a new drum. It's a shame. I played around with vintage-sized heads, blah, blah, blah. The closest thing to go on and off of it with the most space is the Evans 360, and they don't pay me to say that. And let me get a couple things out of the way. I'm not, nobody pays me to talk about drums or play their drums. I'm a semi-professional player. I left this industry, as we talked about before, decades ago. But I've had a great relationship over the years with a couple of companies, and namely, it's the Vic Firth Stick Company and the Zildjian Cymbal Company. They've always been extremely kind to me, and anything I've needed, they've always helped me out with. Prior to that, during the Baldwin era of ownership of Gretsch drums, the same was true. So nobody's paying me to say any of this, because personally, when I'm done with this, I'm done. Don't send me an email to ask me to build you a drum, because I'm not going to do it. I've had 5 in process for 8 years, and they're not done yet. So the odds of me getting another one done are slim to none. I skipped one part of the shell in the nomenclature when we first spoke, and that's the fact that the snare side of the drum, or the bottom of the drum, has to have what's known as a snare bed in it. It's a shape, it's an arc, whatever, cut into this bottom that lets the head have an arc in it so the snares will pull across it and touch it. You have to have that in the drum unless it's a Rogers Dynasonic. A Rogers Dynasonic can work without a snare bed because that's a large metal, not large, but it's a lightweight metal frame that holds the snares and the snare tension separate and then presses itself against the bottom head.
It's like a reverse bed.
It's not a reverse bed, it's a piece of architecture. It's like taking the frame of a bridge and holding it against the bottom of a drum. And it will press it against the head and hold it in place. It was a great idea. I don't know the name of the fellow that did all of those designs and patents with Rogers back in the day, but you can look it up. It's all one guy out in the Midwest, and he had some of the most innovative designs I've ever seen. The original Rogers Setomatic hardware that everybody copied, the cymbal stands that moved all around the place. The was Swivomatics or Setomatics? Swivomatics. Those were well ahead of their time, and just beautiful stuff. To everything that came, beyond it, behind it. Right.
He's using isolation.
Yep. The other thing that comes into play with a drum, any drum, and I get arguments about this from people all the time, is that it needs an air vent. There's an air vent in this thing right here. The drums you'd find that I may have assembled from the bottom up with a raw shell, I placed the air vent low in the drum. Theory being, as the air moves down, it escapes closer to the snare head, thereby giving you more dynamics to the snares at a low volume. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but it sure did sound good, when we talked about it back in the day. So, where'd my marker go? There it is. In other words, this drum has the air vent up here. That's where Ludwig put it, right?
That's where Craviello has it.
Right.
Craviello has it too.
And that shell is built to mimic the old Ludwig.
Yeah.
I had to put it here. Now, I don't know that you can really hear that, but in theory, I think you can. There's some other boutique drummers I've seen boutique builders take it even further and put in multiple vents to come out through the bottom. I think it's brilliant. It's got to work. It has to work because the air is going all the way down and it's being released at the bottom of the drum. Therefore, there's more availability to make the bottom of the drum sound on the snares. In theory, could you hear it sonically, orally with an A? I don't know. I think you can, but
You'd have to do it for me and let me see if I can tell the difference blindfolded.
Yeah. I don't know that you could. It's some of this stuff
It makes sense though. Because you would seem to get more energy flowed to the bottom head, which would excite the head more.
Right. So that was the theory of moving the air vent from there to down here. Now, the other thing that comes into play is the amount of air vents in the drum. I wouldn't have believed it, but I had that space tone drum demonstrated to me as a teenager by Al Duffy. The space tone drum, for those of you who don't know, you can Google it, it'll come up. The shell was broken in half and there was tracks on it and knobs, and you could open up the drum and get a big airspace right through the middle of it. Now, in theory, everybody would say, well, that won't work. You've lost the shell, blah, blah, blah. It worked like a son of a gun. In the drum, well, I never did the test. No one I know of ever did the test with a dB meter. The apparent volume of the drum goes up as you open that up.
Really?
Because the sound goes this way and this way. Now, I don't know if that reads on a dB meter, but it certainly does in the room.
Well, it might change the nature of the wave.
Yeah.
There was a perceived sound difference. The snares became more sensitive. It might have been a perception.
Right.
Everything.
What was the question?
Is a perception.
It says here, anything having to do with snare sensitivity is fine.
Yeah, I got a question on that from from the instrument that I brought in.
So as we go to the snare sensitivity, I don't know that opening up the middle would make it more sensitive. I think it would make it less sensitive because we're releasing the air at a much greater level and above it. Keep in mind, when I heard a lot of these drums when I was a young man, they were the Hinger cable drums. And while there's a drum here that I did that's got cables on it, I don't like cable drums. I don't like the way they sound. I don't like the way they feel. I don't like the way they play. I'm not an orchestral drummer. It's not in my wheelhouse. That doesn't mean I didn't make cable drums. I made a lot of drums for people based on their needs, not what I thought was right. So there's a lot of drums out there that I did in one manner or another at the request of the customer, musician, player. What I would do for a fellow in the symphony is not the same thing I did for you guys in the pits. It's not the same thing I did for the guys that were, on MTV when I got home at night, when MTV was playing music videos, swinging for the fences, beating these things like a dead dog. Those drums were all different because they served a different purpose. So we're going to go back to that a little bit.
But you want to take some of these? I have like 3 quick
Yes.
questions. Right? Is there any way to increase the snare sensitivity without changing your heads?
Is there a way to change the snare sensitivity without changing the heads? It's kind of an open question.
Well, let me get to the other 2. Maybe they're
Okay.
related. Does changing the bottom head to increase snare sensitivity add more ambient snare buzz?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That sort of answers the first
Yeah.
question too.
Yeah, absolutely. So the most sensitive snare side head is going to be the thinner head. We'll use Remo terms, but let's be generic. A diplomat snare side.
Right.
It's thinner than an ambassador snare side. None of these here have a diplomat on the bottom. Oh yeah, I got one with a diplomat on the bottom.
Let me take a look at what
You go ahead.
Craviotto does too.
Yep.
So here's one more question. Do you lose body in your sound with a more sensitive bottom head? Great follow-up question.
Not necessarily. It would depend on the snares.
So there's a snare.
Yeah, there's a relationship between the type of snares and the type of bottom head, whether it's an extended snare. This is an extended snare on a single ply maple shell, an old Slingerland shell. This one's been all reworked inside and lacquered. The excess edge has been taken out. Let's see that thing.
It feels like an ambassador.
I think that's an ambassador.
Yeah.
Yeah, be my guess, that's an ambassador.
That's what it feels like to me.
On the questions we just posed, a diplomat snare side will have more sensitivity. It will also give up on you faster at high volumes. So if you're really laying into the drum, there's an action and an activity that happens when you play the drum. As you strike the top of this drum, you're moving a lot of air, and it's exciting the bottom head and making these snares move. If you get onto the drum and lay on the floor and with some earplug, protect your ears, put on some headphones or earplugs, and watch that action. It's my term. It's not a real term. There's a flyaway sensation that the snares return to the head at a different rate of speed than the head returns. So you get booze. You get a snapback of the snares against the bottom head. You can call it flyaway. I call it flyaway, but that's what I call it. But nobody ever coined the term. An extended snare drum, such as this Radio King setup, will fly away more than a tie-on setup like Allen has here. This will hold more contact to the head. For most uses, this is probably the easiest to live with. It's a good set of tie-up snares. The other thing that changes drastically with your sound is the type of snares you use on the bottom of the drum and why. This is a beautiful old set of Slingerland NZ 2013s. Took the tape ends, 20 strands, 13 inches long for a 14-inch drum. This is a beautiful new set of, who the hell makes these? Canopus snares from Japan, and I have to tell you that I think they've done the best job of bringing a snare to the market that really does what it is they say it does. And I don't know these guys. It's very, they knocked off the correct brake metal in the ends.
It's a little bit longer than the 13 inches.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's a little different dimension, and that's okay. That little bit doesn't mean a lot on a 14-inch drum, but what's most important is they've got this angle in the brake metal correct, so when this is drawn across the bottom of the drum and there's an arc caused in the bottom of that drum from the snare bed, this lays flat on the drum and acts the way it's supposed to. It doesn't fly away at a high rate. It doesn't make a lot of extraneous noise. It's also, it's a pretty, lack of better terms, it's a pretty stiff wire. I mean, I'm kind of holding them with the same angles, and they're behaving pretty much the same. If this wire is too loosey-goosey, it's very washed out sounding, very thin sounding. So you've got to have some beef to the wire. You also have to have a wire that matches the snare bed that's in your drum. This drum wouldn't work with either, wow, I got my watch stuck. Wouldn't work with either set of those snares because they're 2 inches wide and this snare bed is not wide enough to allow them to draw across this drum correctly. Now I can't go in there and affect this snare bed after the fact. It's a metal drum. I'm not going to start banging on it, you know.
Yeah.
Wooden drum, I take it apart, take the file to it and change it.
Yeah.
These are pure sound snares. They're a little thinner. These are the heavy ones, not the thin ones. And they got the copper end plates and they do a very, very good job. They don't pay me to say that. It's the only set of their snares that I use.
That's an original Ludwig head on the bottom.
Well, it's a new Ludwig head on the bottom.
Okay, new
And I'll tell you why there's a Ludwig head on the bottom of this drum as we go back to the relationship of,
curiosity to me.
yep, back to the relationship of the head to the shell and why the drum sounds as it does. I lost my my marker again. Tell you what, I should have brought a bunch of those markers, because now I don't know where I put it. Or the orange rag, it's over here. There it is. So, I want to go back to the relationship of the head and the shell. And I'm going to try my best to stay on snare drums specifically. It's easy to get off track and go about other drums. So there's the shell. We did?
And so you got to restart?
We're back?
Back.
So when we dumped out on you, Alan had noticed that I actually have a Ludwig snare side on the bottom of this Ludwig drum, and there's a reason. All of these, all the different manufacturers have a different relationship in the collar height of the drum. The collar being this curved part of the head, from the flesh hoop up to the top. We're going to call that the collar. Here's where this comes from, and if you doubt me, it's okay. Do your own test. You'll come up with a similar outcome. Think of a conga drum, or a bass drum, or timpani. As this collar depth increases, the overtone series of the drum increases.
That's what happens on a timpani when you, oh, it's gone again. This is a great point, because this is very important to timpani players.
Just keep going. So as this,
Really?
you want to keep going, or you want to try to reset it again? I can
No,
reset.
It's rolling. It's rolling. We're just not live anymore.
Okay. You can keep messing around with it then as we roll live, right?
Yeah, but he'll release the whole video.
This is the bandwidth.
Yeah, they neck you down. Everybody's watching football and betting
You
online.
need to get high-speed broadband. And that's a
No, he just needs to
premium-
get high.
I have
Oh, well, that too.
speed.
No, I'm not. Are you paying a premium price?
Yes.
Yeah.
Really?
It's probably
Then get your
everybody.
money back.
It's all the online betting.
Ah.
So as we go, all right, we're not live, but we're going to keep talking.
Yeah.
As that collar comes down and that dimension goes up, the overtone series goes up. You know it from Timpani.
Yeah, the way a timpani is tuned is you're pulling the collar down from the pedal.
Mm-hmm.
That increases the collar length the higher the pitch goes.
Mm-hmm. And the tension of the head also, but
That's the reason to do it. It's
Right.
the tension on the head, but we didn't realize we were increasing the harmonic series.
yeah, you're changing the harmonic series as that goes down. And in the proof to what I just said is think back to gong drums up around the drums, like Billy Cobham used them and blah, blah, blah. A lot of guys use them. You take a 20-inch bass drum shell, mount it sideways, and put a 22-inch bass drum head on it. It's a gong drum. It has a ton of overtone compared to putting a 20-inch bass drum head on it
Right.
because of that collar depth. I figured it out with conga drums. That's where I kind of got it from first and went,
Yeah, conga drum has a
I
really
get it.
deep beds, I think.
Yeah. So is that, if you got a conga drum that sounds a little thin, if you set a new set of heads on it yourself, real, animal heads, if you can, we used to do a lot with rethreading the rods and pulling that head lower. A little better overtone series. On that it was, you wanted a little more overtone. Also, it was a softer landing place for the guy's hands. They weren't hitting the metal rim. On a snare drum, if I start to increase that too much, I set up a really wacky high-pitched overtone that I then have to try to muffle out of the drum. Because it sets up a weird one. You don't have a deep collar, trust me.
Yeah, but I use a lot of rim and I don't use any muffling at
Yeah,
all.
there's none on this one either.
No.
A little different head than yours, and it's my first time with this head, and I kind of like it. The reason there's a Ludwig head on the bottom of this drum is it has a very shallow collar, and it pulls best into this particular snare bed.
Okay.
It's true of almost
Well, it's a
every
Ludwig
metal
drum.
Ludwig drum.
Yeah, it's a Ludwig
Yep.
drum.
And it's true of almost every metal Ludwig drum that if you put, we were talking before about our friend Michael Berkowitz.
Yeah.
I went to his house and went through his stuff. He goes, I don't know what the hell's wrong with my deep Ludwig drum. I'm like, I can't really tell you why, but put a Ludwig head on the bottom of it. And he calls me back in a week. He goes, man, you were right. I mean, I kind of know why, but I'm not sure.
Right.
It's a different relationship, and it puts the meat and sound back. It makes this head a little more predictable when you're, especially behind the drum set. As odd as that sounds, it does. So where were we? We're at the relationship of this head pulling down. And
Right.
while we're on that in timpani,
Yes.
timpani, especially high-end timpani, Dresden style timpani, have a free-floating shell. And there's several patents out there about free-floating snare drums.
Do you want to explain what that means?
It means that the mechanism that tunes the drum is separate from the shell. So the shell can exist in its own space and vibrate freely. It can be done on a single tension instrument like a kettle drum or timpani because that shell can be floated in a single collar and all the other hardware can be outboard of it and let that shell ring free because it only tunes on one side. The minute you introduce double tension,
It's a round bottom.
right, kettle drum goes like this, remember? No, everything's
Closed,
out here.
No bottom head.
Right, no bottom head. Snare drum, I got a bottom head, and I want to tune this head differently from this head.
Why?
Several reasons. If I was in an orchestra, I might not want to. But for harmonic reasons, the feel of the drum under the stick, you may have a buzz coming off your rack tom that's driving you nuts. You may have to change the bottom tension of the head.
Oh, I've seen comments in the Facebook groups about people having trouble.
Yeah.
Tom sounded great when they tuned him off the drum. As soon as they put him on the mount,
Yeah.
they got this awful ring.
Well, that's a whole other reason.
Oh, let's not go into that.
Yeah, we won't go
Let's
there.
stay on snare drums.
We'll stay on snare drums. So the first patent was Charlie Cordes. And Charlie was a customer and a friend, came in the shop. Do you remember Charlie? Did you ever meet Charlie? The CC cymbal toppers we always use is just slide the cymbal on the stand without taking the nut off.
Yeah.
The 4-way drum key worked on the consulate, tuned to, sonar styles key on one side, regular square key on the other, had a screwdriver in it. We all used to walk around with them on a pack. Yeah, we all had one.
Yeah.
When we had consulate holders falling over, you had to have one, or, you got the screw in too tight, that consulate holder was slotted to open up the wing screw so you didn't break your, that was Charlie's. He had several patents. One was the free-floating snare drum. I played the original free-floating snare drum that he was awarded the patent on one day in Frank's shop beyond 46th Street. This is the patent that was sold to the Pearl Drum Company. So the Pearl Drum free-floating drum is Charlie Cordes' design. It's not a free-floating drum, sorry, because it's got a big hunk of metal down here that's holding the bottom head separate from the top head. So it's a true double tension drum with you can swap the shells in and out of. It's not a free-floating drum. It can't be. You cannot affect two different tensions on a single shell. So there's a few other patents out there floating around. There's one, a fellow local to me has one. I don't know, a little close to Charlie's for my taste. And there's another fellow in either New Zealand or somewhere that has one over there with the great whites.
The Gladstone design.
It's not a free floater.
Yeah, but you could tune the top and bottom simultaneously, like a free float.
No, it's different. So we'll go back to that one too.
Well, there's 3 ways. You could do the top separately, or the bottom separately, or both.
Right. The Gladstone drum is a great instrument. The mechanism passed through like this. It had a 3-way key on the top of it. Arnie Lang has the best version of these drums. If you're gonna go get yourself you're not gonna find a real Gladstone drum. If you want a Gladstone drum and you're an orchestral player, get a hold of Arnie Lang. He's got them, and he's done the absolute. He knows the history. He's done the best job of remaking that instrument of anyone. There's a few other people that have tried. He's the one.
And he studied with Billy also.
I would have.
Yeah.
Probably figured he did. The idea was, we've got calfskin heads, and I'm behind. I'm in the pit, right? I'm wherever, and calfskin moves with the weather.
And humidity, yeah.
And humidity.
And temperature and humidity, and/or.
So the idea of the 3-way key on a Gladstone drum was one position brought up or down both heads simultaneously. One position brought up or down the top head only, and one position brought up and down the bottom head only. So you weren't reaching under the drum, knocking it over, whatever. Keep in mind, these are analog days. You didn't have a digital punch to go back in there and fix it if you made noise. They also had a very quiet, was known as a Gladstone strainer that fell off on the side of it very quietly. You can't hear a Gladstone strainer turn on and off if it's done quietly. There is a noise.
Yeah.
There's a noise here.
Yeah.
No matter what you do.
I tried everything.
There's no noise here.
Yeah.
This is a Gladstone style strainer. There's no noise when I close this strainer. Yes, it's a Pearl SO15, but it's still the same. It's the same theory. So in the analog days, that was extremely important.
Well, the calf heads would change pitch and resistance, rebound resistance would change all of that, like while you were playing it. You didn't. Sometimes you had to do that while you were playing.
Absolutely,
You
and
couldn't
that's
wait for a break or a tune to stop.
that was the idea. Now you had a nice muffler in it, and people say it's the only internal muffler you can use. That's open for discussion.
I never used it ever.
The first thing I did was take it out of this drum.
I don't think this has one.
No, it's probably built without one.
Yeah, it doesn't even have.
Most guys took them out, and anything that was the theory being anything that encumbered the inside of the shell, took away airspace, blah blah blah.
Absolutely, and flow. Also, change the
Right.
flow of the air.
I just want to make one point. If you get back to a free-floating snare drum, there is a free-floating snare drum, and it's existed forever. It's called a rope drum. So if you go back to this, Fife and Drum Corps, 1776, the Hellcats, I think they got Cooperman maybe, the beautiful, brand new but beautiful marching rope drums. That's a free-floating snare drum because those heads are adjusted by the ropes and the tensioners, and nothing is contacting the shell.
Right. No tension is
Right.
placed against the
But
shell.
you can't tension the bottom separate from the top.
No,
Right.
no.
Right. Now, for an orchestral person speaking to you about how they're going to tension the snare drum, they're going to have the relationship of this top head to the bottom head basically the same. They're going to want these to vibrate the same. No matter what Matt says when he's over there throwing around drumsticks because he can't make his router work. For most of us, most of our uses and most of the people that are going to watch this, they're going to be sitting behind a drum set most of the time, or a trap kit, whatever you want to call it. I tend to use older terms because those are the ones I knew first. They're all valuable. Alan remarked when he came in, this Craviotto drum is very similar to this Ludwig drum. This is the drum I play. Trust me, if I thought I could make myself a better drum, I would.
And also, my whole life I used this drum.
Yeah, this is a marvelous
I
instrument.
only got this drum when I bought a Craviotto kit.
If I didn't have this drum, I'd go to one of those drums. It's as simple as that. And I got to tell you, I've never found another one. I've never been able to purchase another drum like this. A lot of people tell me, oh yeah, I got a chrome over brass Ludwig. No, you don't. They were done after '63. Now there are modern ones, but they're different. But to get these have some unique aspects to them in their sound and the way they speak. It's a great all-around drum. You can use it for almost anything.
I did.
Yeah.
My whole life. For every kind of, I played every kind of music on it.
I'm not a symphony guy, so it's hard for me to speak to that. I've made a lot of symphonic snare drums. There's a lot of other things that have come about with cables and cable snares, and it's hard for me to warm up to it, even though I've made them, because I don't necessarily like them. We were talking before about playing the drum and the snare snapping back against it, which when we're addressing some of those questions about snare sensitivity and sound. This drum, and I got to thank my friend Gary for bringing it, was built specifically to address that. So a couple people have handily taken credit for this over the years, and I will tell you that this is the only design of anything I've done that's mine. Everything else that I've done, I gathered and learned from someone else. So this is the only design that's mine. Everything else here I got from discussions with other musicians, drummers, other builders, Gary, Al, maybe on the phone with somebody out in California. I find that there's a very finite amount of people out there that actually have a grasp on this stuff. I know there's more than I know, so don't hear this the wrong way, but if you're in New York and your stuff breaks, you better go to Maxwell's and talk to Willie.
Absolutely.
If you're in South Jersey or Philly and your stuff breaks, you better get a hold of Gary. If you're in California, you better go to the Hollywood Drum Shop and see Stan. Now, I'm sure Steve Maxwell has somebody in his Midwest store that's just as good, but I wouldn't know who that is. Most guys out there, and many of them I worked with who followed me, were hacks, and I don't care. They were. I wasn't building this to be pretty. I was building it to be functional. This drum came about from a caffeine and THC infused conversation with Charlie Callis. Do you remember Charlie?
I met Charlie many times at the counter buying drumsticks.
Right.
He would show me his model of stick that Frank was making.
Yeah. So for everybody that's watching this that's younger or doesn't know who the heck we're talking about here, Charlie Callis was a comedic actor and drummer. So Google Callas, I think, but it's Heart to Heart, the old television show. He was the driver.
Also, he was on the Carson show a lot.
He was on the Carson show a lot.
No.
He got his break working in the Catskills, making faces while he was in the band behind the comedian, and the comedian got ticked off.
I remember telling that story.
Yeah, the comedian got ticked off, threw the microphone down, and said, "You think you can do it better than me? Go ahead." And he got up and did it, and launched an entire new career.
Yeah.
So the theory behind this drum is, when we're talking, is when you strike the drum on the batter side, this head moves away and comes back at a different rate than the snares, giving you that snap back or flat back or whatever the hell you want to call it, when those snares come back and touch the head a millisecond or so later than the head actually returns. The cables hold it in place. The drum was built to model a Ludwig super sensitive with gut and wire snappy snares. If you think back, and you can, guys, young guys, you can Google it, Ludwig combination snares, super sensitive. It'll come up, you'll come up with a picture. The old ones with the tube lugs, with the thinner bridge of snares coming across, the wire was interdispersed with adjustable gut. That drum did two things. It played at a very low volume and sounded these snares, but could take a lot of abuse and concussion without a lot of snapback because the gut holds it in place. So that was the theory behind this drum, not to have two different sounds or three different sounds. The only way I could come up with combining a snare without a mechanism was to use two releases. This is made with nothing more than a belt sander, a vise, a hacksaw, and a drill press. It's not rocket science here. This is literally me going to Canal Street and buying some brass and some screws and drilling it out and tapping it and putting it together. That's all there is to it. What the drum morphed into was a that's out of whack, huh? What it morphed into was, well, if 2 is good, 3 is better. There's a lot of companies that, major manufacturers that have triple throw-offs on one side and 3 different types of snares across the bottom, whether they're wire snappy or cable. I don't really care. You're missing the point. It's not what the drum was built for. There was rock and roll guys that played this, orchestral guys and Broadway guys, because
Yeah, you made one for me.
yeah, it was flexible. I don't play this instrument. I don't need it. I have no need for a drum like this. And honestly, it would get in my way. The 2 releases would get in my way as I play.
You'd have to play it this way.
Yeah, and then you can't get to it, you know. That's the next part. The other thing we should really address here, but since we're talking about the snare drum, whether you're left or right-handed, whether you play, rudimental grip or match grip or, French grip or German grip, I don't really care. If you're right hand dominant behind the drum set, the main position for your snare drum release should be under your non-dominant hand, so you can turn it on and off. Or if you're playing and you got to make a slight adjustment of the tension, if you're right-handed, it better be under your left hand.
Okay, I want to talk to you about this.
All right.
All right. I'm going to use the snare drum now.
And yours is under your left hand, by the way, Mr. Righty.
That's because you put it on the stand.
And you usually put it somewhere else?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to talk about now. I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to ask you if it really matters or am I nuts.
Well, we know you're nuts, so.
Okay, great. Then we don't have to go through this.
All
I
right.
don't want to waste too much time.
Oh, we got time. We haven't crashed. Have we crashed the internet again?
I put it this way.
Good. We got a question too.
I put it in my groin area.
I'm going to tell you why I wouldn't in a minute.
Yeah, tell me why, and I'll tell you why.
No, you go ahead.
Do the question first.
Yeah.
Is there any go-to snare strainers to do different snares, strainers work better with different shell types?
Yes. Yeah. Basically,
Say the question.
yeah. So the question is, does a different strainer, now, and I'm going to assume the strainer we mean the release because we've been through this, does some operate at a different level or have advantages over the other? The answer is absolutely yes. Especially when we go back to what we were talking about before with the analog days of the noise they make when they turn it on and off. And it's my opinion, this is my opinion, that you have to be able to adjust the drag on the strainer. So in other words, if you're a real heavy, the drag would be the amount that it loosens up at. So think fishing, and if anybody fishes, as you hook a fish, there's a drag back, that can pull away, otherwise the string snaps. Same thing happens here with vibration. The drum will detune, the snares will start to loosen up. This strainer can be adjusted. There's a set screw right here. You're not going to see that on this camera, but there's a set screw here. The set screw in the old Rogers strainer where you can loosen that set screw up, hold the shaft with a pair of pliers, and tighten that down a little bit and reset the set screw. Now, it's going to be a little harder to turn, but it's going to resist loosening up much more. So that's an absolute advantage. The other thing you have to think about is how far the snare releases when you release it. Some drop further than the other. So if you have a drum that you find I can't get the snares to turn off, you may have to change the strainer to something that drops a little further, or you've got this bottom head pulled down so far, the snares are laying on this rim and they're still sounding against the head from the movement of the bottom head when you play it. Point in fact, Elvin Jones's old snare drum, done by our friend and mentor Al Duffy. This drum is very, very unique. I put this on. It had a little 3-point on it that went bad. I didn't want to Swiss cheese it too bad. It had the fish-ended strainer on it, adjustable butt plate on it over here that bent was wrong, and someone who shall remain nameless that worked at the shop whose name ended in an I had moved it up, which won't work because now it was contacting the top flesh hoop when you went to tune the drum. So I took it off, and I just put a little, butt plate here.
Never saw any mount even that high on a drum.
Well, I just put it there to get it out of the way of this.
Yeah.
So if you have to think back to the old, fishtail crutch holder with the thumb screw, they had moved it up to make it work with this arm.
Okay.
Not Al, was after Al. And so it moved it from those two holes up to those two, and now it hit this, so you couldn't use the drum. Plus it was bent up anyway, so I took it off. And they're like $1 gazillion to get a remake of one, and I'm not gonna, I want to play the drum. Al, with his machining background, opened up the bridge of this snare side. Gretsch never made a rim like that. They had a small opening in them because the snares were always 13-inch snares, and the straps or the strings pulled through, or they're only going to pull through the width of gut. Well, opening that up, but not bridging it up like this snare side rim where it's bridged up.
That's a separate piece that was put on it.
Right. And today it's made into it here.
Yeah.
It's kind of built in. It's built into this Slingerland one, right? If you don't do that, when you turn the snares off, they lay on the rim and lay on the bottom of this rim and right against the bottom head, and you just can't turn them off. The snares will sound when they're turned off. So, how do you fix it? This is a Remo Ambassador snare side with no collar. You can get them. There's no collar in this head. It looked like a banjo head. It's flat. So there's no collar.
Wow, where did you get that?
I walked into a store and went, "What's that?" and bought it.
Wow.
All right, you can get them. So it's a fix that people don't. I was not going to tell anybody what it was, but I have to. The other things that were done to this drum, it was urethaned inside to brighten up the chamber.
I can see that. Yeah.
And the snare bed is totally reshaped. Most people would look at this drum and say it doesn't have a snare bed. I said, no, there's no snare bed in there. Well, there absolutely is. It starts out here and it goes back. And Al was an innovator in that with stretching out the beds, making sure the snares lied flat, and that head had an arc and it tuned evenly across by having this nice gentle taper. Production, if you're going to make this rim for production, a die-cast rim, they all bridge out here so that they'll turn off. So that's a fix. The Ludwig snare side would help, but it wasn't enough on this drum. So the Ludwig snare side has a much shallower collar. This had no collar. I walked into a music store and bought it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
I went, what the hell is that? He goes, I don't know, there it is. I said, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah. So they exist. They're built for some sort of specialty application. I don't know whose. Somebody smarter than I can post that later. But that's a real good way to, my rim is pulling down so far, my shell's undersized enough that rim is pulling so far I can't get the snares to turn off. Just go to a snare side that has less collar depth, and you'll be able to get through it. All right, I went off track. We got any new questions? That's it?
All right, so what I want to ask you about, you know, I set it up with the snare this way. This is where my snare is facing, and the reason I do that.
We're going to agree for the reasons, but then, okay, go ahead.
The reason I do that is I like the snare response when I play over the snare,
Right.
the snares rather than
Right.
not over the snare.
Right.
So I can play this and use this sound if I want to.
Right.
But I like playing over here.
But when you go to turn it on and off, it's kind of in a, here, and here's why I said what I said. All right, I got to put this thing back on the stand. If you were to do that with this drum, you'd be at a direct disadvantage because you'd have a release that's going to hit your rack tom.
I mean, this is an easy, this is
Right.
it's maybe a half-inch swivel.
Right, it's going to hit your rack tom.
Yeah. And then some of the older drums, also, here's a secondary reason. Some of the older drums have a big handle on the snare throw-off, and it's above the rim. So I found that it's much easier to not to hit that when it's in the center of the drum.
Yeah, which would be why.
It's right in the middle, so I don't have to worry about my sticks hitting.
Yeah, see, that's why on this one
Yeah,
it's
that
bent
kinda-
over.
Right, that kind of thing.
Right.
I don't want that on the side where I can hit it with the stick.
Yeah, see, this one is turned over on the deeper drum. It wouldn't have been turned over because there would have been shell area taking it up on the old 3-point.
So those are one of the reasons is ergonomic for the sticks. to keep getting out of the way of the sticks, and the other main.
So
reason
if we
also-
have 2 releases, though, now we got a problem because I can't get to it.
Yeah, I know, but you
Right.
got to do this.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
So you're in the middle. You're saying I can get it on off with either. I'm saying you can play that press roll like this and have the same effect that I have here. As long as I'm still over the snares,
Yeah.
right? I'm still there, but I can get it on and off with my weak hand while I'm still playing around the drum set. I see a lot of guys put it here at like 5 o'clock.
Right.
And I don't get it. Because now if I'm going to come down and lay into that drum with a one-handed rim shot,
well,
I'm right
yeah.
on top of the release
Yeah.
or the strainer. It's not a good place for it. So we actually agree because we're only, you know,
Yeah.
It's
But
where we
want-
place
you
the
wanna
press
play
roll.
over the
Right.
snares. It's just that I like this position.
yeah, and I go here with it.
Yeah, and
So a
and
6-1
the reason I
half.
don't like that position.
Because you don't tune your drum straight both sides?
Well, that could be the reason. I never thought of that, but maybe you're right. But more than that is that I like when I practice, I want to hit the same spot on the head.
Gotcha.
And this is not the same spot. This is the same spot.
Yep. Oh, you're absolutely right. And that's the fun of this is we can agree
To disagree?
and disagree, but yet
Agree with the disagreement.
we're still agreeing.
We're still agreeing on how, but right.
You know.
But in a different way.
Yeah. So I put it out to the sides when I played a press roll. And you're absolutely right. If you're going to play a press roll, you want to be on top of the snares because you're forcing that column of air and the sound
Right,
waves
down into
down
it.
to the
You
snares.
get the most snare response
Right.
that way.
And that's where the whole theory of putting the vents low on the drum comes from.
Right.
Right.
It all works together.
Now, the tom-tom, I put the vent in the middle. You know, as you add vents to the drum, the perceived volume of the drum goes up, like we talked about before with the space tone. Most of the stuff I did from a raw shell have 4 air vents in them, and they're down low. Not necessarily great big huge vents, but 4 vents. There's a caveat to this. You can add so many vents, you might set up a problem. If you've got a rack tom or something you can't get enough sound out of, sometimes just adding a second air vent's all you need to increase the
Yeah, I was
overtone
gonna say,
series.
You can have different number of vents in the
Right.
drums depending on their relative volumes.
And I've seen snare drums drilled full of holes that sound just marvelous. You know, there's some designs out there like that. You can see daylight through them. They sound great.
I saw one design where it was the shell was 2 pieces.
Yeah.
Actually, and they bridged the space with the
It's
the casing.
it's our friend in Boston. It's oh, he's going to kill me for forgetting his name. Plays in the symphony. Makes the cable snares with the bridge with the plates on the end of them.
Yeah.
That's his, and it's modeled after the Space Tone, where the plates are here, but it has the cables and they tie up. It'll come to me. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on his name. He's going to hate me for it.
Yeah, I don't remember
Yeah,
where I saw it.
very nice guy,
But somebody
great
had-
musician.
I was on the road. Somebody had one of those drums, and he showed it to me in his hotel room.
He built it to, well, I can't think of his name. It'll come to me. He did it to mimic a Space Tone, but it's just wide open. There's a few
Yeah,
people
right,
who've done
wide,
it.
Just wide open.
Yep.
You can't adjust it.
And other builders out there, you're going to look at us and go, you guys are nuts. There's no way it can't sound right. You're full of it. Listen, if we were wrong, a rototom wouldn't sound like anything. There's no shell. And a rototom has its place, you know.
Yeah, it's
Not necessarily with me,
not my favorite sound or instrument. No.
but it has a place.
Yeah.
You know, and it has a true use and a sound that.
And you know a rototom when you hear one.
Yep.
I can recognize one.
Absolutely.
It's definite unique sound to it.
Yeah, I've seen, you know, and then there was the point in time that Pearl mounted them in the phenolic shells, and they gave them a little more throw, and you could tune them. They were pretty cool. They did it I've seen it done in a snare drum. It's a lot of mechanism. Kind of weird if you really get playing it a little rough, it starts to back off. As you're playing the drum, it's getting lower and lower. You're kind of spinning it around.
How much time have we done?
You have one more question,
Yeah.
all right? Somebody wants to know how hard it is to find the shallow heads.
I would say it was extremely hard. I'll tell you, I just walked into a company in Wappingers Falls called Alto Music. It's a locally owned music store, and 2 of them were on the shelf. It's got to be something you can order. It was a stock Remo product. I don't remember the actual SKU number of it, but it just didn't have any collar to it. So it's an Ambassador snare side with no collar. If I bought it off a shelf, it's got to be available.
You have a more Lumiere, or you want to
Talk about who?
Sue.
Who's
You
Sue?
haven't met Sue yet?
I haven't met Sue.
No.
Oh, you're Sue.
Yeah.
With the T.
Right. The tsunami.
That's Sue. The
Yeah,
tsunami
the
Sue.
new wave.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd like to invite you to this new social media platform. It's
Do I have to
monetized.
buy soap? Is it like Amway?
No, actually, it's a little bit like Amway. It's sort of it mimics a multi-level marketing thing, but there's no investment. You know, it's
Oh, good. I don't want that soap.
No, it's absolutely free to join, and you don't have to invest any money in it whatsoever. And you behave pretty much like you behave on Facebook. It's the same kind of.
I can misbehave then.
You can misbehave that way.
Can
but
I
you
take
might
fake?
Get thrown out.
Can I take fake vacations
If
on
you-
Sue like I do on Facebook?
You can say whatever you want, but if you get into spam or trolling or that kind
Oh,
of
yeah,
thing,
yeah.
I mean, they're very careful about the environment because it's basically designed to attract content creators. Well, and Sue is that it's sort of actually think of it like it's a combination of Google and Facebook and Twitter. Okay, so it has the feel of Facebook. It's a social networking software, but it's monetized like YouTube, and it's got hashtags like Twitter.
Okay.
And you can attach your account to Facebook and to Twitter and to Instagram and all of that. And how the monetization works, you know, people don't understand what that means. They think they have to pay money into it. No, you get paid for attracting network activity with what you post.
Mm-hmm.
You know, views on.
And they're doing that from their revenues raised
From the
through
marketing
advertising?
ads, right.
Gotcha.
It's the same model that Facebook uses. They sell ads based on the based on the population. You know.
Yep.
They offer ad to marketers. They say we got 4 billion people. That's worth a lot of money to marketers. And then there's the traffic itself. I mean, they base it on impressions and clicks, and the impressions are triggered by views. You know, when you look at something, an ad pops up. That's called an impression.
Sure.
And somebody's paying for that ad to pop up. So the fact that you've interacted caused an ad person to have to pay for his ad, and it generated income. So the more traffic there is, the more income is generated from the ad marketing. So what they do is they look at the traffic you generate and how much money it caused to be generated. They give you a percentage of that money based on the percentage of your of what you did against all the other traffic. You know, so if you had 1%
Gotcha.
of the traffic of the day, you're going to get 1% of the ad money. Well, not really. You'll get 1% of 90% of the traffic.
Gotcha.
They take 10% to run the platform with, and the other 90% is shared amongst the content, you know, people.
And it's spelled TSU, right?
It's TSU, like tsunami.
Okay.
It's an invitation only.
That's why you keep inviting me.
Yeah, because that's the only way to
Okay.
get in.
I knew there was a reason.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it's great, and they have a beta group program. And we got a group made under the beta group program. You need internal permission to do that.
Gotcha.
It's a public group, and it's called the Art of Drums, just like the group we have on Facebook. And
Oh,
we're
cool.
inviting all of the people on the Facebook groups to join us on the Sioux side.
And I don't need a VPN. I can just get in on the internet, right?
So, yeah, straight internet. It's just like logging into Facebook.
And it's like this,
TSU, yeah,
right?
right, like tsunami.
Got it. I want to go back over something I missed that's drastic, unless you've got a good question for me, Matt.
Rock power tone snare seems to like a very high tuning. Is there a way to get more range sound from it?
I heard the high tuning and range. Just say it to me again, the question.
He has a Rogers power tone snare
Okay.
that seems to like a very high tuning.
Okay.
Is there a way to get a more mid-range sound from it? I have an aquarium vintage head.
Well, I would say a high-pitched tuning in and of itself is self-defeating to the mid-range sound. So probably, I'd go two ways. The first thing I would do is relax the tension of the snare side head a little bit. Both Alan and I ascribe to the same style of da 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 da. You know, I got the bottom head a little tighter than the top head. And sonically, this isn't going to go across the internet very well. The other thing to keep in mind is there's a lot of gadgets out there. You know, I got this dial, that dial. You know, I don't need anything but a drum key and a little feel and some ears to tension a drum, and that's all anybody needs. If you find you need you know, something in inch pounds to go around it, you got problems. I've stripped a lot of screws in my life. If you're cranking on something that hard, you created a whole nother set of problems. But here's the point. An absolutely perfectly round drum and a perfectly tuned snare drum head ain't gonna sound so good. It's gotta be a little imperfect. It's gotta be just a little off.
Just like my time.
Yeah, well, my life. You know, you have to, somewhere in there, it's got to be a little off, or it's just not going to sound right. I can't tell you why, but it's been proven to me over and over again. So I want to cover a couple things here that we didn't really get into. And I'm going to give you the little secrets that were given to me years ago. From this, you can go make yourself a snare drum. You can go get a blank shell from the Kellers. You know, well, you're gonna have to get it from a distributor. You can, if you're smart enough to steam bend it on your own, feel free. If you want to block it together and cut it out on a lathe, I don't care. However you do it. Here's what you want to keep in mind. You need a gap between that flesh hoop and the shell, or it's not going to sound. We proved it to you with the Fibes drum before. That's oversized. If this is the outside of the drum, and this is one wall of the shell coming down, you have to put a bearing edge on the shell. Now, a lot of guys will tell you, oh yeah, the first guy I ever saw with a router and a table, blah, 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 was Tim at the Professional Percussion Center. It wasn't my idea. I called Al Duffy when he was down at Pearl and asked him what he was doing. And he told me what to go buy. And I drilled a hole in the table and put the thing in. It wasn't, I didn't make it up. That's what they were doing for production. Here's what you have to keep in mind. As you change, it's my theory and the folks who taught me that you want to maximize the outer, you want to maximize the head, period. So I don't want to cut this bearing edge in for no reason. I want to start at the outside. So if I've got 13 7/8 inches of head area, I got 13 7/8 inches of head area.
I got a question for you when
Yeah.
you get done with this.
All right. Most bearing edges are going to be kind of like this. A little rounded in here, right? Just that little bit. They're going to kind of look something like this, but this is really going to be round, like we feel it on these metal drums. You got to take a few drums apart and rub your hands around them. And we're going to call that, you know, a 45-degree bearing edge. And that's what we were doing in the store. I learned this way before a router went in on how to reshape a bearing edge, you know, going after it with a rasp file. Gary's done it.
Not me.
Reshaping the drum, sanding it out. It takes hours. Not necessarily going after it with a power tool. I've turned single-ply Radio Kings into slinkies. I've wrecked more drums than most people have ever had the chance to wreck. I've done it all. I think I can get that glue ring out and make it stay together. Well, no, I couldn't. But it was worth the experiment. That's the way I see it. Here's what I found, and I didn't find this on my own. I got it from a customer. You know, so this is the inside of the drum. I got the shell over here again too, right? So I got a basic 45-degree. As you increase this angle in a snare drum, the drum plays better at low volumes, period. And everybody's going to argue with me, but it does. They're about a 45 or around over. That's around, it's about it's a little more. It's like 35, yeah, a little more.
This drum is
Right.
beautiful at low volume.
So there's the proof. That one's rounded over more. Now, in theory, I knew it, but I had a customer who came in and asked me what I was doing and why. Colored shell, single and snares. Came back to me and said, hey, Tim, I want you to listen to this. These drums are virtually the same. I put a different angle on it. It's absolutely right. Absolutely right. The drum will play better with more angle. Now, don't send me any notes on Facebook or blog that I'm a jerk, because I don't really care what you think. It is how it works. When you take this same idea with the shell, here's the outside. If I do this, if I bridge it in the middle, I'm giving away head area. I'm still going to get the same basic sound from the angle to the inside, but I'm losing a little head area. And if I lose head area, I'm losing volume, period.
Okay, so here's my question. John Traviato, he's been making a new bearing edge that you're not even talking about. He calls it the baseball bat.
Rounded, over.
Rounded,
Sure.
really rounded.
On a tom-tom, it would be marvelous. On a snare drum, I'd have to hear it. If it's a single-ply snare drum with a glue ring, it probably sounds great. It's a different animal.
But, okay.
It's a different animal.
But it can work. I mean,
Absolutely.
He's obviously making it work.
Absolutely can work.
But it goes against what you're saying here.
All right. Well, I thought we were going to 6, see? We're only going to 4:30?
Well, I need to take a break.
Yeah,
But
so
you-
I wanted to get that out. The bearing edge relationship is crucial in the sound of a drum. If
Well,
I've
yeah,
got
I
a
mean,
single ply and a glue
and
ring, I
Johnny,
can round
by the
that.
way, you could specify several different.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he makes a lot of different choices on the bearing edge. You
Yeah,
can
and he
choose which one.
builds beautiful, beautiful stuff. You know,
Yeah.
we had the discussion riding here as
Yeah.
but I don't have a lot of respect for a lot of guys around the country that do this, and I certainly do for John, and I do for a couple of guys in the Northwest that are building the heavy drums. I think what's the fellow's name that brought back the George Way company? Dunnett, Ron Dunnett. Ron Dunnett builds really some marvelous, marvelous instruments. So I'm not speaking to those guys when I say things like I think there's a lot of guys out there that don't know. I'm talking about the guys who are blogging and throwing everybody else under the bus for no reason. Like, I know more than you do. Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't.
Everybody knows more than everybody.
Yeah.
On the internet.
And that's what I meant by that. But there's several people out there. Is it GMS drums out on Long Island? They build some great stuff. And I don't know any of those guys. But, you know, they build some wonderful instruments. So don't hear me wrong on some of that. I hope we covered it. Did we get the questions? Hope we covered it. We're going to kill it. Thank you to Matt Patella for having us here. Gary, come around here and take a bow. My friend Gary Jacari is here, who brought me this drum so we could talk about it. Come over there and sit where Alan was.
You have to talk into his chest, though.
Yeah. Gary worked with me for a short amount of time at the 46th Street store.
Well, we worked at both.
Were you on the 8th Avenue store?
We helped Frank move.
I don't remember that,
Well,
but
we were his moving.
you were
crew.
6 feet tall when we moved, and that's what happened. You got shrunk from all that weight.
And I was on, like you, we were on first name basis with many great players,
Yeah.
such as Papa Joe Jones, and Papa Joe Jones gave me a nickname. Papa Joe being
That's
a
right.
man similar in stature to I, called me Wilt the Stilt.
Exactly.
Anyway, we both helped. You and I were hired by Frank to move him from 50th to 46th Street. I was studying with Norman Grossman at the 50th Street location. You were studying with Sonny at the time, and that's where we met, at the Pro Drum Shop.
Well, there you go. We met way back in the day, 8th Avenue and 50th Street. We done? We're good? Matt Patella, thank you for having us. I hope we got a lot of this information out there in a fairly concise method, even though the internet killed us several times. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you and good night.